We're on the air. Great. Hi, this is Larry Swanson. I'm with Sitless.com, and this is the second in a series of office fitness interviews that I'm conducting. Today, I'm really happy to have with us Jo Masterson. She's the COO and the co-founder at 2Morrow, Inc. They do mobile applications that help people change their behavior. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let Jo introduce herself because she'll do a much better service to her and her mission at 2Morrow. So, Jo, tell us what you're up to there at 2Morrow.
So it's actually some pretty exciting stuff. I come from a nursing background originally, and then kind of moved into technology as my second career. And 2Morrow, it's pretty exciting. We're getting to incorporate the newest technology, mobile technology, and kind of behavior change from the health perspective, specifically mostly around wellness and some chronic disease. And I would say our approach is a lot different than most what you would call technology-based wellness things. We don't track your steps, which is maybe the most common out there. That's a great tool, but a lot of people are doing it. And we have a totally different approach, kind of talking about habits.
Great. And that, habit formation is, well, we talked about this a little bit as we were setting up, but to me, there's so much information and advice out there. We all know, for example, in my realm, everybody's seen the headlines about how horrible it is to sit all day, and we know we need to change our behavior. But behavior change in general is difficult, and making new habits is even harder. And you guys have developed some expertise around that at 2Morrow.
Yeah, I think we started with really this idea of saying, how can we use this really powerful tool that's in everybody's pocket to help them create the life they want, what's important to them. And when you look at that, when we really come down to it, what makes the difference for people are those little habits, what we do when we're not thinking about what we do, right? So we can all be good with willpower and effort. We can all make changes, but if we don't make those into habits, then when our willpower gives out, we fall back on whatever those habits are. So we took the approach of saying, how can we help people focus on some of those little habits, those things that will be the default in between your efforts? And that's kind of, we started looking at some of the work of B.J. Fogg out of Stanford University, where he has a whole approach about tiny habits. I think you mentioned that in your book as well.
Mm-hmm.
And really loved what he had to say. We've been down to talk to him a few times. We also looked at some of the other behavioral science stuff going on. A little bit of stages of change, Steve Clemente, talking about people aren't going to do things they're not ready to do. If you're not aware there's a problem, you're not going to make a change. If haven't contemplated the issue, you're not going to do it. So we know that we have to be at the right place to make a change, and that comes from stages of change. Then we know that there's these habits, these little habits, are really necessary to create lasting change. You can make short-term change without addressing them, but not long-term change. And that we kind of learned through Fogg. Lastly, a little bit of B.F. Skinner, even, which I know is not wildly popular sometimes, but he's all about repetition. Basically, you can train yourself to behave differently, and the hard part is, how do you create enough willpower or get from I don't do this now and I want to make this a lifetime habit, and that's really where the challenge comes in.
Right. Well, I love that idea that because willpower, Baumeister and Tierney's book about that is all around, and I think there's awareness of that, and there's sort of awareness that you can't just make a habit happen, and that notion that you were just talking about repetition. What have you discovered? One of the pieces of research that I've come across is Philippa Lawley, this woman in England, who tested that idea that it takes 30 days to form a new habit. That's sort of been a truism. And she was the first person, and this was only like 4 or 5 years ago, to actually test that. And she found that actually there's this whole range, like anywhere from like 20 days for a super simple habit to like a year to develop a hard to acquire habit. Have you found with people using your app, you must have a lot of data about how people have actually changed. What have you found in that realm? Is there sort of a rule of thumb or a guideline about how long people can expect it'll take them to instill a new habit?
Yeah, I think that she's right on, that there is a range, and it depends. We kind of go back to Fogg again. And one interesting thing about Fogg's research that he says is basically it takes some level of motivation and willpower to do something different than you normally do, right? If it takes a little tiny bit of willpower, a little tiny bit of motivation, then it's pretty easy to do and you're more likely to do it. If it takes a great big amount of change and willpower, then you can still do it, but you're less likely to stick with it. So he says break it down to, if I want to go from being relatively stationary to being an active person who's very physical, if I start off like I often have in my life, saying, I'm going to exercise 20 minutes a day. That doesn't sound unreasonable. I can do that. Well, by day 3, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Whereas if I say to myself, that took too much energy or willpower apparently from what I had. But if I back it off and say, well, my commitment to myself is going to be when I first wake up, I'm going to put on my tennis shoes. I don't know if I'm going to do anything. I can if I want. I don't have to. My goal is to walk some, but I'm going to commit to putting on my tennis shoes. I can do that. That's a habit I can form that didn't take very much willpower, so I'm much more likely to stick with it long term. So breaking this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what's interesting about that is that I've read a couple of things lately. I've been the research I've been doing on the exercise chapter in my book. There's some intriguing new research out that shows that like surprisingly small amounts of like as little as 5 minutes of running a day can give you almost as many benefits as longer runs. And there's another guy in England, I believe, who did some research that's showing, it hasn't been published yet, the results, but he's demonstrated that as little as like 2 minutes a day of extremely like high intensity bicycling can do that. So the combination of this insight that you've had about how, and BJ Fogg has had, about how small is better, and then this insight that like there's surprisingly good benefits to small amounts of exercise, that seems very promising.
Well, I think there are some lessons to be learned here. When you're in a very motivated state, it's a great time to make big changes in your life. It might be when your kids just graduated school. Life's going to be different. I'm going to make changes. Or I just got a divorce, tends to cause people to be able to make big life changes. There's big life occurrences that give us this extra motivation, and that's a great time to maybe, you hear big success stories. Somebody had a heart attack and they went back and they changed how they live. But for most of us, our day-to-day is not about these big life occurrences. It's about, you asked me, let me give you an example. I used to work at a university, and they decided to start a wellness program. And I'm like, cool. I care about my wellness. I used to be fairly athletic. I'm not very much anymore. Count me in, count me in. And then they did some stuff, and the very first thing they came up with was the Biggest Loser contest. And I'm like, oh, because this is what's going through my head. Oh, you want me to publicly try to diet, something I haven't been very successful with. And you want me to do it in front of my coworkers who I want to respect me. And by the way, you're encouraging me by telling me you guys are going to help me out, watch everything I eat, encourage me to work out. Well, all of a sudden, somebody who was very interested in making some positive changes felt alienated. I said, oh, I might fail. I don't want to do that. Whereas if now what we're doing with our programs is encouraging people to say, everyone's at a different place. If you're not ready right now to make a big effort to lose a lot of weight, where are you at? What are you willing to do? What's important to you? For me right now, it's trying to be important to say, I don't want to sit all day, every day of my life. So what are some little ways I can start incorporating that I'll actually do? I have a couple of things that say, every time I take a phone call, I start off standing. Now I sometimes sit, but hey, I'm starting, right? So if I'm on the phone, I'm standing. I have some other things that say, if it's stairs and it's less than 2 flights, I take the stairs. I don't take the elevator. I drink water between every other beverage. They're not really giant things, and I understand that really fitness-focused people think it's kind of a cop-out, but I'm saying there's a real-world situation that if they're not careful, your wellness programs and initiatives can attract the motivated, the fit, and the energized. It's not that hard to do.
No, that's it, and that kind of gets it. Like the difference between, you had talked about this when you first began talking about the difference between just the fitness trackers like Fitbit and FuelBand and the Misfit and things like that, And what you do, you're not just tracking, you're kind of more guiding. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I would say that, I love the step trackers. I use one. But they really only track my steps. They really do. They only track my activity. Wellness in general and happiness and behavior change is a whole mess of things other than just how physically active I was today. If I have a bad knee, which I had knee surgery about a year ago, then walking 10,000 steps might be a challenge. But that doesn't mean I couldn't stretch. But that fitness step tracker doesn't track that I stretch. So our approach is to focus on the behavior. So it's a yes or no question. Did I do this minor thing I said I would do? Did I do it, yes or no? Not how much I did. That doesn't mean we don't want to count our steps, because that can be motivating. That doesn't mean we don't want to count our calories. That can be helpful. But what it means is, if you're into those things, do those things. But on the other stuff, it's a yes or no. I want to have family dinner because I'm less stressed. Did I do it 3 times this week? Yes or no? Right? So it's figuring out what's important to you, what's a minor thing that would move you forward toward that goal, and then it becomes a yes or no answer question.
Right. It seems like people like that simple yes, no, binary kind of decision making. Is that kind of, I played with a couple of your apps like when we first met. That was almost a year ago though, and I've got to admit I've forgotten exactly how they operate, how they work. But is that is it sort of a decision tree kind of thing where you're like just making yes/no decisions at different junctures? Is that how your apps work?
Our main, we really have 2 platforms. We have a make platform that helps people make habits. And we have our new break back platform. We really realized that the approach is not good for breaking habits like smoking or drinking too much or reading. We've been working with behavioral scientists at Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center on some new stuff there. But today, talking about the make platform. So to make new habits, it's extremely simple. We didn't reinvent anything. It's stuff you would have written on a piece of paper in the future or in the past. But we ask you to define a goal. So say our goal is to lose 5 pounds. Say both of us want to lose 5 pounds. Then we ask people to pick 1 to 3 habits that would support that goal. For you, you're already athletic. You might say, okay, I'm going to get up 5 minutes earlier and do 5 minutes more a day, or I'm going to pick up an extra day of working out, or whatever that might be. For me, I'm a little less active. I might say, if you tell me I have to do those things, I will say no. If you say, what are you willing to do? I'll scroll through the list in the habit library and I see things that say things like eat on small plates. I'm like, I can do that. Take the stairs. I can do that. Stand during phone calls. I can do that. So there's a habit library that's full of suggestions that get people's brains thinking. And then they can also customize each of those or create totally custom ones. So really what we're asking to do is look at a goal and then to think of 1 to 3 things that would move them toward that goal, not trying to reach it all in one step.
That's great. That's one of those principles that jumped out pretty quickly once I started reading Fogg and Duhigg and all those guys, is that you really have to take small bites. The classic example is waking up on New Year's Day and saying, okay, everything is going to be great this year. My relationships will be perfect. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to save more money. And then by January 12th, you're miserable because you haven't done any of that stuff. So,
yeah, and I think it's fine to do that. We all want to do that, and those big goals motivate us. The difference is if we break it in and say, okay, how am I going to get there? This is our app and our approach are not helping you decide what you want. We figure you know what you want. There's a lot of goal setting things out there. Our thing is saying, okay, so how are you going to get there? You want to raise. What are the habits that would help you get there? Oh, maybe showing up to work on time. That might be for you a relevant thing. For somebody who's always there early, why would we make them do that? We wouldn't. So the key is personalized. Every person decides what's important to them. The next is every person decides what they are willing to do that's actually relevant to them. And then we just they just use the app to record those and then to track. So if they say I want to drink water 6 times a day, they just click on it 6 times a day and the app reminds them to get off track. If they want to do something once a week,
So you must have a really big library at this point, I'm going to guess, because you've been at this for a while, and
Yeah.
and you have a lot of different applications and a lot of different users. So is that knowledge base of things you can do that must be just constantly growing?
You know, it is, but in order to not overwhelm the user, as we add new things in, we really remove things because people can always customize it themselves. But what we found is if you offer too many options, then people get overwhelmed. So we just keep fine tuning it. But we have groups that are using this as a wellness app, and their habits in the habit library, they customize them to fit their group. If we have a group that's working with new diabetics, they have totally different habits that they are in their library. Everything from maybe checking their blood sugar to checking their feet every day, right? Something to look for things that are new habits. Well, if you're already good at one, if you already check your blood sugar, you don't have to track that. But what if you don't check your feet? Maybe it's helpful to have that reminder, and you track it until it's a habit. And back to your initial question, you know, people track a lot of different times. Things like drinking water and stuff, most people, if they track for about 5 or 7 days, they'll go fine. But change is not a straight line. Anything more than quitting smoking or losing weight is, and people ebb and flow. So what we do see is people track for a while, they got it down, they keep going pretty well. After a while, they start to fade off, and they're like, oh, I better start tracking again to get back in the habit, so to speak. And so, you know, it really is a journey and a process. And I think one of the really interesting things that talking about the fog and doing as well is they both talk about triggers or cues and the importance of those to really making a change. And that's something I do want to bring up. This idea that if I just tell myself I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water a day and I'm not used to it, I'll forget. It's not intentional. It's just that it's not the biggest thing in my day, right? I have jobs, I have work, I have family, I have people. People care about their wellness. It's just that unless you're in the wellness industry, it's just not top on your list. It doesn't mean you don't care. I've sat in wellness conferences to hear them say, well, you know, most people in this company don't care about their wellness. And I would argue that. They all care. They just care more about their job and their teenager who's going through something and their mom that they're moving into assisted care and their finances. So,
and as you talked about earlier too, it might be the approach. You mentioned that, like how off-putting that one program was to you that was offered at one. I can't remember, but the wellness program you talked about.
Like a Biggest Loser type contest.
Yeah, which, like, I can see where that's not going to appeal to a lot of people. And I assume you've figured out some different approaches with the work you've done.
Yeah, I think what we love is to really offer up either people use our products, our apps in 2 ways, either to support it. So if they are doing a Biggest Loser contest, they can tell their people, check in your app, we just added a whole bunch of habits that can help you be successful that you could choose from. So that's one way, it supports your other initiatives. But the other way is to say, hey, listen, our wellness initiative this year is to have everybody come up with one little change per quarter that would make you healthier. And you pick it, you decide what it is, and you're responsible. We're not your mother. We're just trying to help our whole company be better, right? And so this idea of not controlling what people decide they should work on, but giving it a total choice. For one person, it may be habits that are working toward running a marathon. For another person, it literally might be habits that are about reducing stress and their blood pressure, right? So letting the people decide what's relevant and what's doable for them is really important.
Right. So that's that kind of tailoring it to each person in both the approach and the content that you're doing. That's interesting to me. Hey, I wanted to shift gears just a little bit because you mentioned the Fred Hutch project. For those of you, Joe and I are both here in Seattle, and there's a local institution, the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, which does a whole bunch of different kinds of cancer research. And 2Morrow just partnered with them. They're developing an app that's it hasn't been released yet, I don't think, but it's a smoking cessation app. One of the things that's intriguing to me about that is that really what I'm on here is sort of a sedentary cessation mission. And I know I appreciate your focus, and that's my focus too, on making habits. But I'm curious what you've learned about breaking habits, like in the smoking cessation area especially.
Well, and we learned a couple things. First things we learned were from our own Wellness Make Habit platform. We initially let people try to break habits, to say, I'm going to track every time I did something so I can see if I'm going down. So if you wanted to quit smoking, you would track every cigarette and you could see as you go down. And people love to do that. So we learned two things. People love to track stuff. If I got to track every single time I ate a brownie, I would actually not mind that so much. But what we also found is it didn't really change behavior. What we're kind of doing, and the smoking one, so when Fred Hutch came to us, they came to us because we won this U.S. Surgeon General Healthy App Challenge for our Healthy Habits app. And they knew we were behavior change specialists. They knew we were here in the Seattle area. And they said, we've got this new approach to behavior change using this ACT therapy, which is an acceptance and commitment therapy. And we can really help people break some really hard, ingrained habits. And we want to take this program and see if we can deliver it over a mobile device. And so we mobilized that program for them. They did the first ever randomized controlled trial to see if an app could help people quit smoking. And it did. It was about 3 times more effective than trying to quit on your own. So that's great. We're taking all of that data, updating it, and putting it into this new platform, an updated version of it. But we learned a couple really interesting things, and the data was just published last month, so this is actually the first time I've talked to anybody about it. But
I won't tell anybody. I promise.
Yeah, that's good. You can tell everybody. We want everybody to be able to be healthier. But one of the things we learned is in that first version, we had smokers track a couple things. We had them track how many cigarettes, so we could see them go down in cigarettes. We tracked every time they had a slip or an urge. And we also tracked something brand new that was created at Fred Hutch, and this is tied in with acceptance commitment therapy. We had them track every time they were able to have an urge to smoke and to let it pass without acting. So the really interesting thing, and that's very core to the program, the fact that that actually was helpful to people didn't surprise us. That's what we hoped to see, and that's what we did see. So tracking every time I had an urge and I was able to let it pass actually was very, very helpful for people. The part that kind of surprised us is people loved tracking that they smoked every time they had a cigarette, right? I mean, it was the most used feature. But when they went back and analyzed the data, what they realized is it actually made you less likely to quit. So part of it is, of course, if you're tracking, you're still smoking, so you're not quitting. But they actually were able to look at it and say, people who focus on tracking their cigarettes rather than tracking that they let an urge pass were less likely to quit. And what we think happens is that they're focusing on the negative. They're focusing on what we don't want you to do, and you're actually kind of getting a little instant reward by getting to track it, right? Whereas, say, in our brand new version that's rolling out here this month, we've taken that whole most popular feature out because it was proven not effective. Now what you track the whole way through is you learn a new skill, and then we're asking you, saying, this is a new way to think about your urges. Today, when you have an urge, try this and see if you can let one or some of those urges pass. And what we found is people started to get excited about tracking that I resisted. I got credit for it. I tracked it.
That's really interesting to me. I just want to interject because in my reading on habit formation, there's a lot of, it comes up over and over again that just tracking something can change the behavior. But it's just that observation that's been made. I don't know that anybody's looked at the mechanism. It sounds like you guys might be the first one who are actually digging in there and going, it's not so much maybe that you're tracking the behavior, but that you're tracking your success or little incremental steps, or I mean, it's a nuanced twist on that insight that's just kind of a truism. And this was the first research, to your knowledge, that's explored this. It sounds like.
Well, especially in the mobile device, and mobile's different because it's real-time instant tracking that you don't use anywhere else. You know, it's always with you. People go home for their phones when they forget them. It's not like logging into a website or talking to a counselor once a week. These things maybe play true there. They're faster on mobile because you're getting more real-time tracking. It's easy and fast to track. But I think what I'm really taking away from it from us, and it fits with what we saw in the Healthy Habits platform, people, you know, it's a very mindful approach. What you think about is what you do. If you think about your smoking, you smoke. If you think about letting an urge pass, you let an urge pass. So the hard thing has always been, how do we tell people not to do something and give them credit for a negative? Well, what this Fred Hutch approach has done, which is based on this acceptance and commitment therapy, is it says the first thing is to become aware. So the first couple of days, you actually do track how often you have an urge to smoke. We're talking about the emotion here. Then, once you're super aware of your urges, okay, I know what an urge feels like. I know I'm noticing them now. Now we're saying, okay, next time you have one, we'd like you to try this little exercise. And so for one example, there's this exercise that says, imagine that your urge to smoke or your urge to eat or anything is like a big, gnarly urge monster. And he's standing across the river from you. He has one end of the rope, and you have the other end of the rope. And you're playing a tug of war. The harder he pulls, the harder you have to pull back, and you're going to get pulled into this river and drown. Right? So it's a constant battle that you're having with your urges. Well, what this urge says is, or what this approach says is, there's another way to think about it. Next time you have an urge and you feel yourself struggling with that urge, do I eat that donut? Do I not? Do I smoke that cigarette? Do I not? What you could also do is just think about this, dropping the rope. Let it go. The urge monster will still be over there. He might call you names. He might throw things. He'll stomp and run around. He'll be there. You can't make him go away. But you can decide not to engage. And it's a different mindset. And I know it sounds simple, but it actually is really powerful. So next time you or your listeners have an urge to do something that they don't want to do, you're like, wow, I want to eat that. You can say to yourself, could I just let that urge be there anyway? So totally different than every other smoking cessation program out there, and most behavior change is saying, we're not teaching you how to fight or ignore or distract from your urges. We're saying embrace them. Notice them, they're there, acknowledge them, and just decide that sometimes I can just not act on them.
And I like that idea, the image of the rope and just literally letting go. That's super helpful.
And then so on that day, we say, when you have an urge today, or when you have urges today, try to envision the urge monster on the other end of the rope. And can you envision letting go of that rope? And can you get through this urge without smoking? The other thing it teaches you is that urges come and go. They're like the weather. You know, awareness, sky, it's always there. It's always blue. But the weather blows in and out. And it can blow a storm, and it can be dramatic, and it can be hard, or it can be beautiful. But if you wait it out, it'll pass. And so this idea of it's not ignoring an urge, it's not tricking yourself, it's not distracting, it's not trying not to think about it. It's saying, keep in mind that these will come and go, and maybe this time you can let it go. And so there's a whole bunch of these different things. So what we're really excited about is to take what we learned about breaking images, and we'll be incorporating it with what we know about making new habits. Breaking habits. Incorporate it with what we know about now making habits, and realize that it's a different process. It's not the same.
But that's interesting.
Track your bad habits.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me that you sort of found this making habit thing in your breaking habit initiative, and I guess there's probably naturally going to be a lot of interaction between those. So
yeah.
And one thing, it's almost 11, Joe. I know we both have busy days and things to do, but
Yep.
One other thing, if you have the time, I'd like to ask you one other thing. You mentioned that all of your apps are mobile, and that's become such a huge trend. And it's, it seems like you're pretty far ahead of the curve. Was that a technology visionary thing, or was that a practical, this is the best way to get the information to people thing, or both?
I'd love to say that we started off by saying what's the best possible way to help people make these changes, but really we're geeks over here at 2Morrow. We like technology, I mean, we looked at it and our founder said, I'm not missing out on the mobile. He was part of the .com. I'm not missing out. This is the next big thing. We have this extremely powerful computer right in everybody's hand. How can we use that? How can we best use that to help people make their lives better? And really, it was started off saying, we have this new powerful tool. We have this goal of making lives better. Where do they intersect and how do they work well together? And we will have website versions of stuff, but what we find is very few people use those. It's just, it's a great way to take in larger pieces of content, but it's not as great for tracking instant little daily things. And so the other interesting thing is you know, there's all this move toward kind of quantified self and more this passive tracking, like you would with the Fitbit you wear on your hip or something. And those are really powerful because they give you data. However, the reason we don't automate this more, the reason we make you click on it, is because this is a very mindful process. Changing the habit, by definition, the habit is what you're doing when you're not thinking about what you're doing. We want you to think about what you're doing. To think about it, there's a way to record it. It's giving you this little instant credit for doing what you wanted to do. We're trying to help people deliver on their good intentions. And we're doing that by helping them see that they can be successful. And we're learning all the time. I think you were talking about the research or where we're at. There's a lot of great companies out there making a lot of great tools. And I think, you know, everyone's not as competitive maybe as it is in other industries. We're all very excited about what other people learn. But for us, we really early kind of decided one of our key differentiators is going to be, we're going to be evidence-based. We're going to look at the research because we can make things up. Everyone can, right? Hey, I have a theory, let me make an app. I wish it was that easy, but it's not. But it's we said, okay, let's see what the research says. What's the data? What's the evidence out there? And then with Fred Hutch, this is the first, you know, study on a smoking cessation app, and we're just got funded for another study by the Washington Life Sciences Discovery Fund to do a second study on that.
That seems, I just want to ask quickly about, you know, the Fred Hutch and these other similar academic partnerships. That just seems like a really cool opportunity. You know, I've learned so much by reading a lot of the original research about sitting and sedentary behavior and exercise and a lot of other things, and then applying it, and then also developing that sort of science-minded evidence base to everything. Are you finding a nice back and forth there as you work with the Hutch and these other folks?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, there's challenges, pros and cons with working with academics, right? It moves so slow. You know, we started this research 2 years ago. We did the stuff. We did all these things. Then the data comes out, and we can see the data, but they have to analyze it. Then they have to wait for it to be published. So the problem is academics, we need them to actually test and prove things, because like we would have maybe initially looked and said, oh, everybody likes to track cigarettes, including the people who quit. That must mean that's important. But because of the research, we know that's not. We know that's not the case. But you have to wait for research, but the real world doesn't wait. Technology sure doesn't wait. So we're kind of straddling that of saying we're taking the best knowledge we have today and moving forward while we're doing the studies. We've also just done with New Mexico State University around the Make Habit platform, the creating new habits, and we're waiting for that data now. But not being afraid to be wrong, but basing on the best information you have at the time, and then testing it, even though the testing may fall behind a little bit. You know, I think that's a differentiator for us.
Yeah, one of the other things that's interesting to me as I've delved more into the science world is how much there seems to be more of a trend now in science to not be afraid to talk about results before they're actually published. And so that trend, I wonder if, again, if this is a push me, pull you kind of thing between the commercial world and the academic world of, you know, like, boy, we're pretty sure this is going to work. Let's go ahead and build a product that does this. And then if the science doesn't support it, well, we'll backtrack or whatever. But or if it does support it, great. We were way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and I think the real challenge for us is to be able to have the data a year before it's published. Because it takes a while for them to write it, and then you have to wait for it to be peer-reviewed, and you can't talk about it before it's published. I think that's why you see more and more companies going to private research institutions where we hire the researchers and do our own research. That always adds some, but the academic research is more credible because they're going at it from a different approach. So I think you have to do both. I think you have to say, we're constantly looking at analytics and data. The nice thing about being a technology option, we can see, we've had over 450,000 users of our product, of our apps. We have a lot of data. We can see what people use. We can see what they say. We can get some feedback from that. We don't know who they are, but we can see the aggregate information. So we can learn from that. So I think you have to do your internal research, your market research, what will people use. You have to do the analytic research, what does the data actually say? They said this, the data says this, and then you have to at some point have somebody who's smarter than we are, look at the data, look at all the results, analyze it, and say, what did we really learn here? Which is truly something we can say is caused or related to this, and which is this stuff that also happened to be there, you know? And so it's a shame that it moves so much slower. I wish there was a way to make it faster, and it's frustrating when, from the outside because it's different, but it still serves a value. It's because it's peer reviewed, because it's academic, it adds a credibility that it's not paid for by me, that it's not serving my purposes. And so, you know, I think it'll always drag behind, but researchers like Bricker are pretty impressive. Researchers don't normally want to go with someone brand new like mobile. It doesn't have good data to compare against. It's new. It's hard to get IRBs, which are the independent review boards, through because nobody's done it before. So, you know, researchers like Jonathan Bricker and Fred Hutch Cancer Research that funded the initial study themselves are really important. They're people and organizations who are willing to fund innovation and go in a slightly squishy mode. And then now Bricker's trying to go back and do a big study. So he's applying for a grant right now to hopefully do a much bigger study so we can get a much bigger data set.
That's great, and that'll be fun to watch that dynamic of the back and forth between the hectic, fast-paced world of the internet startup and the academic world. But it sounds really fun. I wonder, one last thing, if you have a couple more minutes. Are you at all involved in the open science world? You mentioned there's a couple of big trends that converge in that open science world. Just the idea of that idea of sharing data earlier, more open publishing platforms, but also open data access. Like you mentioned, I'm assuming your data is proprietary since you're a private company, but there's a lot of data out there and ways to get it. And if you hire, like you said, the trade-off between the private research firms don't have as much credibility as the academic outfits. So I guess it's not just a quick back and forth give and take. It's like this multi-layered give and take that I'm picturing of all these trends.
It is. It's kind of interesting. As far as the open data thing, it's very interesting. So with the smoking cessation program, we sell that into state governments who will offer this as an option to a quit line, or to insurance companies who will include it as part of their health plans, or to employers who offer it as a benefit. So for us, that becomes personal health information that can fall under HIPAA. So we're different than a lot of apps out there. We're going through the whole HIPAA compliance process, which is kind of a gnarly process. But even though it's overkill for this smoking one in some ways, we constantly are getting asked by more and more healthcare related stuff. So in that case, we're not as open as some groups. We can be open with some aggregate data. This is what we learned off of some of the platforms. But we're very careful about what we learn and how we treat data in relation to an individual's private. For some individuals, if their employer knew they smoked, they could either be charged extra or fired, right? So you have to be very careful with how you treat people's data and how you keep the identity separate from the data. So we're taking a little bit of a slower approach to that and doing it right, or as right as we can. We work with HIPAA consultants, outside groups, to make sure we're looking at how we're doing it and making sure that we're setting it up in a way that works for enterprise and government as well as for individuals. And appropriate levels of security all the way through.
Right, that could be a whole other conversation, and I'd love to talk to you again somewhere down the road, because that whole idea of big data, privacy, the trade-offs, that's just a huge trend, and it seems like there's a lot of information that could be gleaned from like your data and other similar companies' data. But I think we should wrap it up for today. It's about 10 after, and I know we both have lots of stuff to do. But I want to thank you so much, Joe. Do you have any? I just want to see if you have any closing comments to share with folks.
You know, I think we love what you're doing there. We love the idea of really people understanding what our default behaviors are doing to our health and to our wellness and to our happiness even. And you know, your focus, I know, around what the impact of the fact that so many of us have sedentary jobs is doing to our health. And I love reading your books because I'm one of those sedentary people. You know, I can find myself, we're in a startup, we're working 12, 14 hours a day and realize, oh, we didn't stop and eat anything today, we didn't get up, we didn't do anything. And so I think the constant getting those messages out about the default behaviors, what we build into our default day is really, really important, whether it's using standing desk part of the time, whether it's taking a long way to the bathroom every time you go, so you get in a little bit extra. Like I walk around the long way. It's not very long, mind you, but you know, you try to make those little habits that kind of build some extra things without inconveniencing you. And I think that's a really interesting piece. You know, some people perform out there pushing. It's good that people push the big stuff and what can happen because it helps motivate us. But then to also be able to back off and deal with the real world and what will people actually do is a nice intersection to learn and to explore.
And I love the way you just phrased the idea of inconvenience. I mean, it is inconvenient to get up out of your chair and move, but everybody understands the need to do it. And I think both the work that you're doing, and it meshes so well with what I want to do, is try to get people to get those little habits, just stand up, move a little bit more. And anyhow, so it's kind of a mutual lovey-dovey thing here. I love what you guys are doing as well. And I see you as like some of the main people kind of pushing the sort of the methodology of like how to actually get people moving again. So, well, thanks so much, Joe. And I'm going to hit the stop broadcast button in just a second here. And I want to thank all my viewers for tuning in today and for tuning in later on YouTube. And stay tuned for the next episode of Office Fitness Interviews. Thanks.
Thanks. Next.